It's lovely to be with you this morning. Like Harry said, my name's Joel. I'm one of the elders here, one of the leaders here. And this morning we're continuing our series. We're spending this month looking at mission. What does it look like for us to be on mission together? When we started here in the Gilbourne Centre, we said we wanted to be a God-first church. It means we put Jesus first. He leads the church. We want to be gospel-centered. We're transformed by what Jesus' death and resurrection. Our lives are changed, and we want to be mission-focused. And so if we're God first, we're gospel-centered, it should propel us into mission. It should lead us into mission, because God is about a mission. He's about redeeming and restoring what has been lost and what has been broken. And so this month we're looking at their mission. And the incredible thing that we've seen over the last couple of weeks in mission is that God wants to include us, right? It's not just, he could do it himself, but he says, actually, I'm going to use this ragtag, like delinquent bunch of people called the church to bring redemption, to bring my kingdom, right? He includes us in his mission. And so today we are looking, we're in Luke 19. So if you've got your Bible, fantastic. If you haven't got a Bible, it will come up on the screen. We're in Luke 19. And in the passage we're in today, Jesus, he's passing through Jericho. It's this big city, and he goes for a meal with a man named Zacchaeus. And if you read the Gospels, you see in the 3 years that Jesus is traveling around speaking, doing all these incredible things with his disciples, you see there are times when he speaks to huge groups of people, where thousands of people gather, where there's incredible miracles as he walks along the streets and interacts with people one-to-one. And obviously these things are incredible. We desire to see the miraculous. We desire to see, thousands of people, hundreds of people gathering in this space on a Sunday at a time and time, multiple meetings or whatever it looks like. We desire those things. But when you read Luke, when you read this book time and time again, you see the way of Jesus doing mission. The way that Jesus does it is sitting at a table and having a meal with people. All right, Robert Karras, who's this biblical author that I read this quote this week from him. It says, when you read Luke, Jesus is either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal. Well, that's what you read. That's what you read when you read the Gospel of Luke. So much so that early on in Luke chapter 7:31, Jesus is accused of being a drunkard and a glutton because of how he associates with sinners, how he goes to parties that religious leaders don't want to associate themselves with, the religious leaders don't want to go to. But Jesus, it says in that passage, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. So that should be good news for you. If you are a fan of food and you enjoy a nice glass of wine or whatever drink it is for you, that's good news, because Jesus says he came eating and drinking. And that's one of the primary ways, or one of the big ways that he did mission. Because we looked last week, we are sent as Jesus was sent, and Jesus was sent eating meals with people. So if you're a fan of eating, this is a good talk for you this morning. Tom, I just caught you. So I just caught Tom's eyes. Sorry, Tom, don't distract me. I wasn't trying to say something, Tom, but you just were looking so directly at me. And so we're looking at what does it look like to be hospitable this morning? What does it look like for us as a church family to practice hospitality as we see Jesus practices hospitality? And some of you might be thinking, surely we're not just going to talk about that for the next 15 or 20 minutes. This is exactly what we're going to talk about for the next 15 or 20 minutes, because we see that it's important to Jesus. It's the way Jesus, he's coming from a meal, he's at a meal, or he's going to a meal. We want to be followers of Jesus. And so the definition of hospitality is this, on my laptop anyway. It says, the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. Or if we want to make that slightly more applied for us as followers of Jesus, it's people who were strangers becoming friends, or people who are strangers becoming families. It's welcoming people, the generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, and strangers. And that's what we're looking at this morning. I believe it is important for us. And if you were a guest here this morning, you can be our judges as we go through this morning. How have you found it? Feel free to feedback to the Connect team at the end. Let them know how we've done hosting you, being hospitable this morning. don't really do that. Sorry. That was actually meant, believe it or not, that was actually meant to be a joke. And I thought there was going to be a little, but it sounded like you actually thought I was being serious. I wasn't being serious. Please do not feed back to the Connect team at the end of this time. You feel free to email the office and let us know, but don't do it to the Connect team, unless it's good. And so in this passage, we're going to look at verses 1 to 4. It says, he entered Jericho, it's talking about Jesus, and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. I'm just going to pray before, and we're going to get into it. God, I pray when you speak through this story this morning. Holy Spirit, when you come, continue to speak to us, just as you've already been speaking. I pray continue to speak as we read your word and as we respond. In Jesus' name, amen. So 2 things you see, just as before we carry on with this story. One is that Zacchaeus, he's called a chief tax collector. That means he was not a popular man in the place he lived, because he was not only a tax collector, but he was the chief. And so, number one, he worked for the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire were the empire that ruled over Israel. They oppressed the people. And Zacchaeus, he was working for them as a Jew, but he was working for the people who oppressed the Jews. And further, more than that, he was further oppressing his own people by making money from them and overcharging them. And so he was, whatever that would be for us, he was the lowest of the low. Right, he was at the bottom of the moral ladder. I don't know what profession that would be or what kind of criminal that would be, but he was not a light man. And number 2, it says he ran on ahead and he climbed up a tree. Again, in that culture, men wouldn't run, especially men of high status. It wasn't a dignified thing to do. It wasn't an honourable thing to do. They would walk, they wouldn't rush, and he's got to run, he's hitched up his robe, he's running along. And then furthermore, he's climbing up a tree like a child. This is a man there is no dignity in that. He would lose his dignity, yet obviously there's something here. It's so important for him to see Jesus, to see him as he passes, that he is willing to lose his dignity and run. He's willing to lose his dignity and climb up a tree in order to see Jesus. And in verse 5 it says, Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. You see, Jesus, he chooses to go and eat at this man's house. He chooses to go and eat at the house of a sinner. And it says the people grumbled, because there's significance in who you eat with. Do you realize that? That when you eat at the same table as someone else, it signifies acceptance and kind of a relationship and community. It's the kind of levels. You're sitting around the same table, so in this culture and in our culture, it kind of signifies who is in and who is out. And you see that maybe it's slightly different now with the way we do things and you see the restaurants. They kind of signify who is in and out. Now for us, the boundaries markers are slightly different. Maybe it's more to do with, sometimes it's on how you're dressed. It's more to do with how much money you have, whether you are in and out, whether the restaurants you go and eat at. Like you walk along Warwick Street, and some people are priced out. It's more being priced out of places. And you go past Pitch, and there's only some people can afford to eat there. If you save up and you afford to eat there every so often. And there's other places along there that's much more affordable. Yeah, when we sit around the table together, it represents community and friendship and welcome. And the religious leaders, they grumbled because in their thinking, Jesus associating with these people would make him unclean. He's associating with sinners would make him unclean, associating with unclean, sinful people. Just like associating with sick people, they thought Jesus was going to be made unclean by associating with you read the story of the leper. They won't go near him because they don't want to be made unclean. Yet Jesus, he goes near him. He doesn't have the same fear of them as being polluted by their sin or polluted by their sickness. And Jesus, incredibly, he reverses that. So Jesus, as he's goes to the sick man. Rather than being made unclean by the sick, he brings healing. Right? He makes the leper clean. He does the reverse. And when he comes into contact with sinners, rather than being infected by their sin and taking on their sin, by a miracle, what he does is he makes Zacchaeus clean. Zacchaeus doesn't infect him with his sin, but he comes and he cleanses Zacchaeus of his sin. Right? Zacchaeus repents, and we see forgiveness. We've been singing "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." We see that in this story. It's God's amazing grace that saves Zacchaeus, this wretch, this man who's the lowest of the low. He washes him clean. And we see that, just as a very brief aside, we see that in our society, don't we? We see there's this kind of thing all to do with shame. Shame is a big thing. People are shamed for all sorts of things on social media or in the news or just face to face. We see all sorts of shaming. We see all sorts of shaming go on, whether that's something that's happened to you or something that you've done or something that someone has said to you. Shame is a big thing in our society, and shame, like in this, like we're just looking at here, it kind of can make us feel unclean. It can make us feel dirty. And what we see in this story, and what we see as you read the story of Jesus, is that when he comes, he takes our sin and he takes our shame, and he is able to wash us clean. Because of his death and because of his resurrection and because of his great love for us, he washes us clean. And it is possible to, if you're a follower of Jesus, then he has taken our shame. He took it. It was nailed to the cross with him, that we can be free from that. And so I don't know. Maybe you're here this morning and you're feeling. Actually, kind of links in with a bit with what Mick brought about feeling captive, feeling trapped by stuff. Maybe you're feeling dirty this morning. You can know freedom. You can know what it is for Jesus to wash you clean because of what he has done. Not because of anything you need to do, but because we come to Jesus and he can wash us clean. And that's what we see in this passage. We see Zacchaeus. We see he repents. He comes to Jesus, and Jesus says, "Today salvation has come to this house." Salvation has come to this house. Verse 8. It says, "And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, 'Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold.' And Jesus said to him, 'Today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.'" So Zacchaeus' response to the gospel, his response to the good news that Jesus has brought, is to radical generosity, is to give half of his goods to the poor and to give fourfold to what he has defrauded, had to fourfold to those he has cheated. Right? That's not him giving to make himself right with God or trying to earn his salvation, but that's a response to the salvation that has come to him. It's his priorities change. His heart is transformed, his life is changed, and he becomes God first and gospel-centered, and as his heart is changed by what Jesus has done for him. And so what does that mean for us, is what I want to spend the last bit of our time talking about today. What does it mean for us? What do we learn from this story? Well, the first thing is we see that when we hear the good news of Jesus, priorities change, life changes, our hearts are transformed by the gospel. But for us, we also see, I hope it's fairly obvious, we see, as you read Luke, Jesus is in people's homes. He goes to Zacchaeus' home. They say he's going and eating with a sinner. We want to be a hospitable people. We want to be a church that practice hospitality, that regularly are sharing meals, just like we're going to be doing at Alpha over the next couple of months. We want to be having coffees with people, welcoming people into our homes and into our home here. Because like we've said, if we are God-first and gospel-centered, then it should propel us into mission. And if we care about the people of Worthing, it should mean that, just like we looked at last week, we are involved in the lives of the people who we spend time with. Right? We don't just shout from the atrium and say, "Oi, you're going to hell. You better come up here quick." We see in the story, Jesus doesn't walk past he's passing through Jericho, doesn't look up and see Zacchaeus and goes, "You're going to hell, mate." And then just carry on walking. He says, "I'm coming to your home and I'm going to eat with you." Right? So we don't want to just be far off, arm's length. And maybe there is some value in people. We were in London yesterday, Rachel and I, and there was a guy shouting on a street corner about people going to hell. Maybe there is some value in that, but we don't really see that. We see Jesus talking harshly to the Pharisees. We see his strong words there, but when he's talking to those who are far off, when he's talking to people who don't know him, we see him sitting at a table having a meal. And so we want to care, as if we care about people's eternities, we want to care and serve them in their here and now. And that means practicing hospitality. Now, Jesus, he's pretty bold. He invites himself to Zacchaeus' house. I'm not saying not all of us are that confident that we just walk up to someone and say, who you don't even know, and say, "I'd really like to come for a meal in your house." I think you can get away with it if you're in the church family. I've done it to a couple of people recently in church and said, "I really would love to come to your house and I'm waiting for you to invite me around for a coffee or a meal." And one is taking a bit longer. It's taken a few months, but I don't know if Evelyn's here today. She has taken a hint, and she's invited Rachel and I around for a lovely meal in a few weeks' time. And Alistair and Sheila, I invited myself to their house a few weeks ago, and they have kindly also invited me around. So you can try it. It's worth a go. But if it's just with your friends, then if it's just with people who you don't know so well, then maybe you can invite them to their house rather than just say, "I'm coming around to your house." But it's something... in saying this, we're not trying to add like a burden onto you, right? We're not getting legalistic about it. We're not going to take a note and say, "Right, how many people have you invited over recently?" But there is a challenge to us, I would suggest, to think actually if we want to see people come to know Jesus, if we want to see this room filled on a Sunday morning with people interested about who Jesus is, want to see our Alpha courses rammed full of people. Yes, there will be the miraculous, there will be the people coming up the stairs or God speaking to them, but by and large it's going to be through us being with our friends in our communities, with our neighbours, and inviting them in. And if we're going to do that, then we want it to be a hospitable people. So, most of us already have meals, so we're going to get practical a moment. We already have meals. We're not asking you to add any more meals into your day, but most of us have breakfast, or I have breakfast. Most of us have lunch. Most of us have dinner. Some of us have one or two extra meals on top of that if you're someone if you really like to eat. But what I'm suggesting is, depending on where you're at on your little journey, but some of you, if it's non-existent at the moment, hey, once a month, why don't you invite a friend round for coffee? Or why don't you say, after you're already eating dinner, you make a bit extra dinner and you invite them round? Or if you're someone if you're a breakfast person, you can have breakfast. Why don't you say once a month, you say to someone, actually, do you want to get breakfast together? Some of you have lunch breaks, some of you don't have lunch breaks, some of you, whatever circumstance you're in, maybe that's not such a big thing. Or maybe people at your work, you say, why don't we sit and we have lunch together, we can chat and we can talk. We're just saying, we need to start somewhere. Right, let's make our aim to be more hospitable in 2022 than we were in 2021, whatever that might look like for you. But we can just begin by opening our homes and inviting people in. We want to be a hospitable people. And if this should translate into other areas of our life as well. So it's not just about your home life, although it should start there, I think. But it should translate to our Sunday mornings. We want to be a hospitable church, right? And we're Redeemer. We want to be a place where people can come and feel welcome and feel relaxed. But I just want to let you know, because I think sometimes we kind of get this a bit backwards, or we get a bit confused on it. And I'm talking to the church family, if you're a part of Redeemer, then on a Sunday morning, you are not a guest here. Right? You are not a guest, you are a host. Right, if we're a family together as a church, then this is we'll call this our church home together. You're a host on a Sunday morning. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be on a rota every Sunday. It doesn't mean you're constantly running around doing stuff. But it should affect how we act on a Sunday morning. It should affect how I act on a Sunday morning, because we're welcoming the town, we're welcoming guests into our space. Sunday morning's there for us as a church family, but we also want guests to join us, to see what it looks like to be part of God's family. And so you're a host here. But I think we often get confused with that mentality, and we sometimes act as a guest. When we wouldn't do that in our houses, I don't think. When we're at home, I don't treat my house like I'm a guest there, otherwise nothing would ever get done, and my marriage would not be working at all, and my kids would definitely not appreciate, would definitely not live there. Right? There's a different relationship when you're a guest or when you're a host. And if we come here acting as if we're a guest on a Sunday morning, well, actually you're part of this family, then we've messed something up. Like, so Rachel and I, we were in London this past weekend. We had our first night away since Levi was born. It was very nice. Alex and Lucy kindly took all 3 of our kids, and have realized what a joy it is having six children overnight. But we got to go away, and we stayed in this really nice hotel. Rachel's cousin got us this amazing deal on this fancy hotel in London. And you walk in, and they were fantastic at hosting us. But I acted as a guest because I don't work there. It's not my place. I didn't like bustle into the kitchen and say, "Oh, don't worry about that. Actually, I'll get that." And when the guy took my bags, I happily let him take my bags. It was glorious. I said, "Yes, thank you very much. I will let you take my bags and take them off to my room." And I can phone down at any time I want, and our phone charger wasn't working, so I phoned down to reception. They knew my name immediately. I was like, "Hello, Mr. Tostevin, how can I help you?" I was like, "Wow, have you got a phone charger? How many phone chargers do you need?" I was like, "Just the one will be fine, thank you." "Okay, I'll be up in a minute." And they bring up a phone charger, and they can't do enough for you. He leaves the room, they come into the room, they tidy it all up. They lay out everything nicely in the bathroom. Like Rachel leaves some earrings somewhere, they move the earrings and put them nicely on a little mat for it. You know, what it means to be lovely to be hosted, and I can act in that situation as a guest. But if I go into my home and I leave my bedroom a mess and I just expect Rachel to tidy it up, that's not going to go so well. Or if I just leave my clothes lying around, I don't expect someone just to come and fold them for me. I don't expect it to be all about me and my experience and for me to be served and what I'm getting out of it. There's a different relationship. Do you see that? Right? If we're a family together, then when we come on a Sunday, you're a host. And so I just want us to help us with that mindset, because we do live in a consumeristic, individualistic society where it's, what are you doing for me? How are you going to serve me? And that's the church is the opposite around. It's what I come to. It's not an individualistic thing. It's a family thing. It's a corporate thing. And I say, when I come on a Sunday, it's what can I do to serve my family? Right? Not that I'm not coming with my list of, well, this person didn't do this to me, and I'm annoyed about this. I'm annoyed about this, and I can't believe that person did that. We're a family together, and we want to have lots of guests. So if you're a guest here this morning, we want to host you well. We want you to feel welcome. This is our family home. We want you to see a bit of what it is to be part of God's family. And we want to serve you. And this week of prayer, one of the nights, we prayed together that it wouldn't be uncommon. It would be our normal to have 20 to 30 guests. That's the number that I think it was Pete when we were praying about it. That's what he said. It would be common for us to see 20 or 30 guests join us on a Sunday. And that's going to happen because we are being hospitable in our homes, and we are spending time with our friends and whoever it is that we spend time with, sharing our love of Jesus, asking questions, them asking us questions, being hospitable together. And that's going to come if we as a church together are hospitable. We need to be good at welcoming people in to our home. Well, that's why we've thought a little bit. Now, you might have various thoughts. We've thought a little bit about how does this place feel on a Sunday morning? What does it look like? What do we put on the screens? What do we, all the decor, the layout, all of these different things. But more than any of that, it's about the people, right? So we can do whatever we want with the decor, but if we as a people aren't practicing hospitality, if we're not showing the grace that we have been shown, then we can forget about 20 or 30. Let's be a place that people can feel at home, where people can feel comfortable and relaxed and loved. And then beyond Sundays, beyond our dinner tables, whenever we do things, this is what we're going for. We want people to know they are welcome and loved in our space. So Food Bank, they work hard at making their clients feel welcome, to feel loved when they come into the breakout space. Tots, they work hard to make their parents feel like this is a place they want to spend time, that this is a place where they are loved as they come up. When we do Alpha, the same thing in there. As we run the business of rooms and the co-working and renting out spaces, we want people to experience something of the love of God as they come up here and know that this is a place where they can belong. This is a place where they can feel at home. Even if they hear some things from here that are difficult as we read the Bible together, even if the things that go against what our culture would say as we sing songs together, that they think, really, is that what they believe here? Is that what they think? This is a place they want to be, and they want to bring their friends. Band, if you want to come up, I'm just going to finish. So all that to say, we want to be a hospitable people, not out of duty, but because God has been hospitable towards us. He has come to us. He has loved us. He has served us. So we want to love and serve and care about the people of our town. Now, the grumbling Jews we read about here, they were expecting a Messiah to come on a horse, wielding a sword, sweeping away all their enemies, establishing them amongst the nations once again. But that's not what we see as we read the Gospels. We see Jesus, he comes time and time again to share meals with sinners. As it says in that last verse, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. He came to save the likes of Zacchaeus. He came to save the likes of you and me. And we are invited to have a seat at God's table. Right? In the Bible, you often see the salvation is this picture of a meal or of a feast with God. In Exodus, when God's people are rescued out of Egypt, their rescue is through the act of a meal as they take the Passover together. When they come through the Red Sea and they're on Mount Sinai, God invites Moses and the leaders to go and share a meal with him on the mountain, to come and eat and drink. Last week, we enacted a meal together. We took bread and wine together, remembering what Jesus has done for us, dying on a cross, that we get to be included, not because of anything that we've done, but because of who God is. He says, you are part of my family. I've adopted you. And so we get to respond this morning as sons and daughters of God. If you're here this morning, just like Rod was saying earlier, we would love to talk to you more. If you don't know Jesus, if you wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus, he is inviting you this morning to come and take a seat at his table, to eat and drink with him. Because of his great love for you, his death on a cross, he brings you, he's calling you into his family. And so we're going to respond. If I invite you to stand, we're going to sing. I'll pray. God, we thank you that you are a hospitable God, that you came to seek and save the lost. And one of the ways you did that was through sitting with us and sharing a meal with us. God, we thank you that we get to be hospitable because you were first hospitable to us. We get to love and serve our town because you first came and you loved and served us. And I pray, God, that we would just be continually transformed by the good news that you brought 2,000 years ago and that still applies to us today. God, that it would continue to change us, continue to transform us, continue to astound us as we look to you. Amen.